There are moments in MotoGP when sound itself feels sacred, when an engine doesn't just roar, it confesses. In that sacred noise lives the story of two men separated by half a century and joined by the same pulse. Giacomo Agostini, the immortal architect of speed, and Marc Márquez, the man who bends physics until it obeys emotion. When Agostini looks at Márquez, he doesn't see a successor. He sees a warning written in lean angles and telemetry, a mirror that reflects both glory and solitude. To him, Márquez is not merely fast, he's the embodiment of what happens when instinct evolves into algorithm, where a rider stops chasing the limit and starts rewriting it. There's a beauty in that perfection, yes, but also danger. The danger of stillness inside velocity, the kind that turns champions into relics before their engines even cool. Agostini calls it the loneliness of precision, a state where every tenth of a second costs a piece of the soul. Watching Márquez ride the GP25, he sees not a competitor, but a phenomenon, the seamless fusion of reaction time and machine intelligence, of scar tissue and steel. The telemetry glows like a heartbeat translated into numbers, and yet behind that data he senses a void, a silence too clean, a world with no rival breathing against it. He has conquered gravity, Agostini once whispered to a journalist, but gravity is what keeps you human. The old master knows the addiction of domination, the way speed can isolate as much as it liberates. He hears it in the way Márquez downshifts, not desperate, not cautious, but surgical, as if he's cutting through his own doubts. He sees it in his posture on exit, every degree of lean balanced on faith, not friction. And somewhere in that balance, Agostini recognizes the paradox of genius, that control, taken too far, becomes its own cage. To the crowd, Márquez is invincible. To Agostini, he's in danger of vanishing inside perfection. That's why his words carry weight heavier than applause, because they don't celebrate, they foretell. He isn't warning Ducati or the grid. He's warning history itself that empires built on solitude don't last. And so the legend watches the prodigy, not with envy, but with reverence touched by fear, knowing that the faster Márquez goes, the closer he rides to the silence where even legends must learn to breathe again. And from that silence, born between admiration and unease, began the unspoken duel that would define a new era. The moment the grid realized you don't race against Márquez, you have to deprogram him. He walks through the paddock like someone whose pulse no longer belongs to the human world, the rhythm of his heartbeat perfectly synchronized with the sound of an engine idling at 18,000 revolutions per minute. Every rival watches him pass and feels something break inside, an invisible pressure that twists ambition into fear. In 2025, Marc Márquez has become more algorithm than athlete, a self-correcting equation that rewrites itself corner after corner. The others don't race him anymore. They study him, searching for a glitch in a system that refuses to fail. "You don't beat Marc," whispered a rival engineer. "You must deprogram him." During warm-up, his telemetry lines look inhuman, braking 0.07 seconds later, throttle 0.03 earlier, body angle sharper by 2 degrees, margins so small they feel supernatural. Beneath the helmet, Marc's thoughts whisper like static. "I don't chase the limit, I erase it." His rivals sense that he doesn't fight the bike. He listens to it, the way a pianist feels resonance through the floorboards. One Ducati technician revealed that Márquez asked for a micro-adjustment of the swing arm pivot by only 1.5 millimeters, a change invisible to the eye but seismic in feel. It's his secret art, turning mechanical imperfections into emotional precision. The crowd cheers, but he never hears them. His world is a corridor of fractions and breath. The paddock says he's smiling again, yet his smile feels like an encrypted message. Journalists describe his riding as violent grace, but that grace hides calculation, a dance choreographed in code. Every lap is a psychological ambush. He forces others to see his shadow before their breaking points, to doubt their own maps, to question their instincts. The GP25 doesn't merely respond to him, it predicts him, as if the machine has learned his heartbeat. "If they want to stop me, they'll have to unlearn what they know," he tells himself before the lights go out. The metaphor that defines him is not war, but gravity, inevitable, invisible, merciless. Even the asphalt seems to bend around his will, creating a space where physics negotiates instead of rules. Cameras capture the sparks under his knee slider, like constellations drawing new myths in the dark. His rivals call it domination. He calls it necessity. The climax arrives in silence when he looks at the monitor and mutters to no one, "They're still chasing the man I was yesterday." And in that moment, every rider on the grid understands that defeating Márquez is not about speed. It's about rewriting reality. He moves through the pit lane as if the air itself adjusts to his heartbeat, a living metronome of precision and defiance. The Ducati GP25 beneath him is no longer a motorcycle. It's a pulse that responds before thought becomes action. Engineers whisper about it like a creature with moods. Its front end, once erratic, now whispers obedience through the carbon steering stem. He demanded be reinforced with a titanium sleeve to increase feedback under braking. This Ducati used to dance, a senior mechanic confessed in disbelief. Now it sings. When Márquez grips the bars, he isn't controlling the bike, he's conducting it. The line between man and machine blurs into something holy, something unrepeatable. She's not a beast anymore, he thinks. She's a language only I can speak. In telemetry rooms, the data curves look like signatures. Every oscillation, fragment of his identity encoded in torque and lean angle. Pecco Bagnaia watches from the other side of the box, the silence around him heavier than carbon fiber. The engineers shift unconsciously toward Marc's monitor, drawn by the gravity of genius. The box has split in two. One side burns with creation, the other cools into resignation. A little-known secret circulates quietly. Márquez has been testing a modified anti-squat linkage developed from Moto 2 prototypes, giving the GP25 a gentler mid-corner lift and brutal exit precision. The change was microscopic, yet it turned instability into poetry. Reporters call him the lone gladiator, but he feels more like a lighthouse, bright yet isolated, casting light into a sea of mechanics who no longer look away. If I stop pushing, she stops believing in me, he murmurs during a late-night debrief, eyes locked on the flickering telemetry screen. His shoulders carry both victory and loneliness, twin weights disguised as glory. When he enters the garage, cameras multiply, conversations fade, and even the air smells different, like metal and destiny. The metaphor that defines him is not battle but music. Every lap a crescendo, every corner a note sustained on the edge of control. Pecco's silence becomes the rest in that symphony, a pause that reveals more than sound. The tension builds quietly, line by line of data, until the engineers realize that the GP25 doesn't serve Ducati anymore. It serves him. And when he finally removes his helmet, sweat tracing the map of another victory, he doesn't smile. He exhales, whispering, "Perfection feels lonely." The room freezes, understanding that brilliance in its purest form is also exile. When Giacomo Agostini finally spoke again, it wasn't applause that followed, but the sound of breathing held still. His voice carried the calm violence of truth, the kind that slices without raising its tone. Reporters leaned forward, sensing that what he was about to say would outlive the moment. "A king can conquer," he began, pausing just long enough for the cameras to focus. "But to reign he needs a court worthy of him." The paddock fell silent, and for a heartbeat, even the engines outside seemed to listen. He wasn't attacking Ducati, he was diagnosing it. Agostini saw beyond lap times and podiums. He saw imbalance. They built a cathedral around one altar, he thought, his eyes narrowing toward the red banners fluttering over Borgo Panigale's pride. Inside Ducati's data room, engineers replayed Márquez's runs from Jerez. We had asked for a front fork shim increased by just 0.2 millimeters, a modification invisible to the naked eye but transforming feedback in corner entry. That detail fascinated Agostini, who understood how mastery hides inside obsession. Yet his admiration carried warning. A masterpiece without contrast becomes a mirror that reflects only itself. He spoke of courage, of silence, of how power isolates when no one dares to challenge it. His tone was surgical, his words falling like precise chisels on marble. "They have a king," he said softly, "but the throne creaks when no one else sits near it." Mechanics exchanged looks. Even victory began to taste like fear. The metaphor that followed was unexpected. He compared Ducati to a tree growing toward light yet forgetting to deepen its roots. Greatness, he reminded them, collapses not when it's defeated but when it stops needing to defend itself. Márquez, in the next room, watched the replay of his last lap and felt the words before hearing them, like static on the edge of thought. Am I the storm or the shelter? He wondered, tracing a gloved finger across the telemetry curve that defined his perfection. Agostini's warning didn't shout. It resonated, vibrating through steel and pride. The journalists would later call it the sentence of Assen, a verdict disguised as wisdom. And as the night fell over the paddock, Ducati's red lights reflected on the asphalt like fading embers of a truth too heavy to ignore. Agostini's words fell like fine dust over the paddock, subtle yet suffocating, a truth too familiar to ignore. The history of motorcycling has always been written through rivalries inside the same box, he declared, his tone measured, almost parental. Rivalry, he explained, is not destruction but respiration, the way greatness inhales doubt and exhales courage. Without it, even the sharpest machine dulls, losing the pulse that separates speed from destiny. Márquez listened from a distance, leaning against the GP25 as if absorbing its warmth through the leather of his gloves. He's right, he thought, without friction, there's no fire. In Bagnaya's corner, the silence was surgical, broken only by the hum of a cooling generator. Engineers compared data from the last 5 races, noting a hidden fracture. Márquez exited corners with throttle opening 12 milliseconds sooner, a margin that feels atomic yet decides legends. That tiny figure, invisible on television, revealed the gap between confidence and confusion. A technician whispered that Pecco's rear traction maps had been subtly softened, a desperate attempt to calm a front end that no longer spoke his language. The machine obeyed Márquez's rhythm but ignored its former master, like a compass that had forgotten north. Agostini saw it as the disease of comfort, the way winning too long becomes a kind of slow drowning. His metaphor came from the sea. Even the best sailor forgets the wind if the ocean stays still too long. The words hit Ducati like salt on open wounds. Rivalry, he insisted, is the only oxygen that keeps empires breathing. Márquez, under the helmet, felt both exposed and alive, as though his solitude had finally been named. Maybe I need an enemy more than I need applause, he admitted silently. Cameras caught his expression, half smile, half surrender. The garage lights flickered above him, painting his face in alternating gold and shadow, like a man caught between triumph and fatigue. Agostini's statement was no nostalgia. It was prophecy, the reminder that dynasties suffocate when harmony replaces hunger. When Márquez finally looked up from his monitor, the decision had already written itself in his eyes. Rivalry, he realized, wasn't the threat to greatness. It was its last remaining proof of life. Then came the moment that cracked Ducati's armor from the inside, a silence so sharp it could have cut through titanium. Agostini stood before the cameras, not angry, simply inevitable, his voice calm as a ticking clock. If Ducati wants to build a dynasty, it cannot behave like a grateful team, but like an ambitious one. The words hovered, heavy with precision, and for the first time the red walls seemed to pulse under the weight of expectation. Gratitude, he warned, is the death of ambition, comfort the quiet assassin of greatness. His tone softened, but the blade stayed sharp. I'm not saying Pecco isn't a good rider, but a great team doesn't reward loyalty, it rewards hunger. Inside the garage, mechanics froze, rags suspended mid-wipe, as though sound itself had been unplugged. Is he talking about us? One engineer wondered, staring at the telemetry still open on his screen. On that screen lay a hidden confession. Márquez's braking trace revealed a custom algorithm added by his data analyst, a nonlinear modulation curve designed to maintain lever pressure within a 3-bar window across lean angles, a trick no one outside Ducati's inner core had noticed. It was genius and obsession welded together. Márquez called it breathing through the front wheel. Agostini's voice seemed to echo against that phrase, an old master calling out a new one. The metaphor he chose was from nature, not war. A fruit that ripens too long in the sun forgets the taste of the storm. Around him, the paddock shifted uneasily, the smell of fuel thick as confession. Bagnaia lowered his gaze, tracing invisible circles with his boot on the floor, a man who knew that kindness had replaced challenge. Maybe my silence fed their comfort, he thought, guilt sliding beneath his ribs like oil. The atmosphere felt charged, static building between pride and prophecy. Even Márquez, listening from the corner, felt the sting, praise and warning intertwined. Hunger, Agostini implied, was not cruelty, it was continuity. Without it, even gods forget to fight. The old legend turned away, leaving words that vibrated longer than applause. And in that instant, every heartbeat in Ducati's box learned the same terrifying truth. Gratitude doesn't build empires, it buries them alive. Agostini's creed was not learned from books, but burned into his skin by the exhaust heat of rivals who refused to yield. He had fought his wars with Pasolini and Halewood not across fences, but within the same box, their helmets hanging side by side like loaded questions. His lesson was simple and merciless. Greatness must breathe tension or it suffocates. A team that wins is one where, every Friday, the engineers must decide who to listen to first, not one where everything is already decided. He spoke the line with the calm certainty of a man who has heard engines pray. The young mechanics listened, unsure whether they were being taught history or warned of their future. Do they even know what it means to fight a teammate? He wondered, watching them nod without understanding. Márquez had created harmony so perfect it had become sterile, a symphony without dissonance. The GP25 gleamed under fluorescent light, beautiful yet strangely mute. Inside its data core hid a secret few knew. Ducati had begun integrating adaptive clutch modulation software that altered engagement torque based on throttle delta, a system Márquez tuned personally to feel like muscle memory. It was technology serving instinct, precision serving passion. But Agostini saw danger in that perfection. To him, art without rivalry was like a candle sealed in glass, bright but suffocating on its own light. He told the engineers that comfort is corrosion in disguise. The metaphor he used came from glass blowing, not battle. You must keep the fire moving. Still flame cracks the crystal. The room stayed silent, every word clinging to the walls like heat. Márquez, overhearing from the hallway, smiled faintly, half in agreement, half in denial. Maybe he's right, he thought. Maybe I've made it too easy to worship, too hard to chase. That night he returned to his data screen, adjusting maps until dawn, searching for imperfections to resurrect. Agostini's philosophy wasn't nostalgia. It was prophecy, a call to friction as sacred fuel. And as dawn lit the circuit, the old champion's shadow stretched across the pit lane like a scar, reminding the world that fire, to survive, must always burn against something. When Giacomo Agostini raised his eyes toward the press lights, the paddock inhaled as one. The air itself seemed to contract, the smell of hot rubber mixing with unease. If this box doesn't have two monsters, soon it will have none. The words were not shouted. They landed softly, like ash that still burns when it touches skin. Reporters glanced toward the Ducati garage, where two identical machines waited, one alive with fingerprints, the other gathering dust. Agostini's meaning was clear: evolution or extinction. He had seen it before, empires collapsing not from defeat but from isolation. He's right, Márquez thought, feeling the phrase sink beneath his ribs like a heartbeat gone off tempo. The telemetry screen glowed beside him, revealing a hidden line. An experimental suspension sensor Ducati had installed to record vertical load differentials in real time, a tool meant to translate instinct into data. It was brilliant, yet strangely desperate, as if technology could replace tension. The engineers pretended calm, but their silence had shape. Pecco Bagnaia sat nearby, helmet untouched, eyes lost in a fog of numbers that no longer spoke his language. Agostini compared the moment to a candle losing oxygen. Its flame didn't die. It suffocated in its own brilliance. His metaphor hung there, delicate and exact. A king alone is just a statue, he added, voice almost tender, and statues don't move. Márquez smiled without humor, whispering to himself, I'm not ready to be carved in stone. Outside, night fell over the circuit, neon reflections trembling across the wet asphalt like nervous thoughts. In the meeting rooms, Ducati's strategists began murmuring names: Acosta, Martin, Bastianini, as if summoning ghosts to chase the living. The conversation shifted from celebration to survival, and everyone felt the axis tilt. Even the GP25 seemed to hum differently, aware that its throne might soon be shared. When Márquez finally left the box, rain kissed the visor of his helmet. Each drop a small truth: domination without danger is decay. The old champion's warning had become prophecy, and its echo lingered long after the engines went silent. That night, long after the paddock had sunk into silence, Márquez remained in the Ducati box, surrounded by the soft electric hum of machines that never truly sleep. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him, throwing pale halos over the red carbon curves of the GP25. His eyes flicked between screens, comparing his telemetry to Jorge Martin's, every day to trace a conversation between precision and pride. On the wall hung a photograph of Misano, him and Pecco on the podium, smiles frozen like old currency. I don't need someone to follow me, he murmured to an engineer, voice low but steady. I need someone to chase me. The man nodded, unsure whether it was confession or command. I'm tired of winning alone, Márquez thought, fingers tapping the table in the rhythm of engines. The GP25's data shimmered with secrets. Ducati had quietly tested a microsensor cluster on the swing arm that measured torsional flex in real time, mapping the invisible language between tire and throttle. It was the kind of detail that thrilled him, proof that perfection still had edges to cut. Outside, rain traced constellations on the asphalt, a mirror to the thoughts moving beneath his visor. Agostini's words replayed in his mind like an echo coded into the ECU: warning, blessing, prophecy. The metaphor for his mood wasn't war, but weather, a thundercloud forming without sound, charged and waiting. He felt alive in that pressure, a man reborn inside the storm of his own making. In solitude, he found the faint taste of purpose again, sharp as ozone. The box smelled of fuel, fear, and destiny, a mixture he recognized from the best days of his past. Every victory had left him emptier, yet this silence began to feel like invitation rather than absence. Maybe legacy isn't about winning, he thought. Maybe it's about who dares to steal the crown from you. He closed the laptop, the reflection of numbers fading from his eyes. Behind him, the Ducati glowed under the strip lights, patient as a predator waiting for the next heartbeat. The engineers would find new notes on their desks in the morning, requests, challenges, provocations. When he finally stepped into the night, the rain met his visor like applause from invisible ghosts. And as thunder rolled beyond the circuit, one truth crystallized in him, bright and merciless. In MotoGP, the most dangerous king is the one who races not against others, but against the silence that follows victory.